The Dragon Empire of Velon was the most powerful force in the known galaxy. It spread across 12 star systems, and every planet within those systems bowed to the dragons. They were ancient creatures, born from the fires of dying stars. Their scales were harder than any metal. Their breath could melt mountains. They had ruled the stars for thousands of years, and they believed they would rule forever. At the center of this great empire sat Emperor Hyok. He was old beyond counting. 3,000 years he had lived, and 3,000 years he had ruled with fire and fear. His scales were black like the void between stars, and when he breathed, golden flames poured from his throat. He was massive, larger than a human building, and when he spread his wings, they blocked out the sun. Every dragon in the empire feared him. Every human colony trembled at the mention of his name. But Emperor Hyok had a secret that ate at his heart like poison. In the deepest chamber of his palace, hidden from all eyes, there was a small room. And in that room, there was a baby dragon. Her name was Nuri. She was his youngest child, born only 2 years ago. But she was not like his other children. She was not strong. She was not fierce. When she hatched from her egg, the palace doctors had looked at her with sad eyes and shaking heads. Her left wing was twisted and small. It hung from her body like a dead thing. Her back legs were bent wrong, and she could not walk properly. She dragged herself across the floor while her brothers and sisters flew through the sky. In dragon society, there was no place for weakness. The old laws were clear. A disabled hatchling brought shame to the bloodline. Such creatures were meant to be left in the cold mountains to die. This was how it had always been. This was how it would always be. The strong survived. The weak perished. This was the dragon way. Every advisor in the palace told Hyok what he must do. Every tradition demanded it. His own father had done it to 2 of his siblings long ago. It was simply how things were. But when Hyok looked at little Nuri, something strange happened in his chest. She looked up at him with big, golden eyes. She made small sounds of happiness when he came near. She tried so hard to move, to fly, to be like the others. She failed every time, but she never stopped trying. He could not kill her, but he could not keep her either. If the other dragons learned that the emperor kept a crippled child, they would see it as weakness. They would whisper behind his back. His enemies would use it against him. His power would crack, and when power cracked in the Dragon Empire, blood followed. So Emperor Hyok made a different choice. A coward's choice, he told himself. But he made it anyway. On a cold night, he ordered his most trusted servant to take Nuri away. Far away. To a place where no one would know who she was. There was a human colony on the edge of dragon space. A small trading station called Taiyang Station. It was nothing special. Just a place where humans lived their short, busy lives, trading goods and struggling to survive. The dragons barely noticed it existed. On this station, there was a rehabilitation center for sick and injured creatures. It was a poor place, with little money and few resources. But it was far from the palace. Far from dragon eyes. Hyok's servant flew through the night, carrying the small hatchling in a protective case. Nuri did not understand what was happening. She cried for her father, but her father was not there. The servant left her at the rehabilitation center with a bag of gold coins and a simple note. The note said only, "Orphan dragon. Unknown family. Please care for her." The workers at the center were shocked. They had never seen a dragon hatchling before. Dragons were rulers, not patients. But the gold was good, and the little creature was clearly in need of help. They took her in. They gave her a number instead of a name. Patient 7749. They fed her and kept her warm. But they did not have the knowledge or money to truly help her. Dragon medicine was expensive. Dragon specialists charged fees that could buy entire buildings. The rehabilitation center could barely afford to keep its lights on. Months passed. Nori grew a little bigger, but she did not grow stronger. Her wings stayed dead. Her legs stayed twisted. She learned to speak a few words, mostly asking for food and water. She learned that the workers were kind but busy. She learned that she was alone. The center tried to find someone to adopt her. But who would want a disabled dragon? Dragons were supposed to be powerful and beautiful. Nori was neither. Families came to look at her and turned away with disappointment in their eyes. Eventually, the center made a hard decision. They could not afford to keep her anymore. They had other patients who needed help. Patients they could actually save. They released Nori with a small bag of food and directions to a shelter. She was 2.5 years old, barely more than a baby in dragon terms. She did not understand why they were sending her away. She cried and begged to stay, but the workers had tears in their own eyes as they closed the door. Nori wandered the streets of Taiyang Station. The humans walked past her without looking. She was just another strange creature in a galaxy full of strange creatures. She found a dark alley behind some restaurants and curled up next to the warm recycling units. The heat kept her from freezing. Days passed. She ate scraps from the garbage. She drank water from leaking pipes. Her scales grew dull and gray. Her body grew thin. She began to forget that she had ever had a father. She began to forget the warmth of the palace, the taste of good food, the feeling of being wanted. She remembered only hunger and cold and loneliness far across the galaxy. Emperor Hyok sat on his throne and told himself he had done the right thing. He told himself that Nuri was better off among the humans. He told himself that he would forget her, that she would simply fade from his memory like a bad dream. He was lying to himself. Every night, when the palace was quiet, he thought of her. He wondered if she was alive. He wondered if she was happy. He wondered if she hated him. He had no way of knowing that his daughter was dying in an alley, surrounded by garbage, waiting for someone to care. But someone was coming. Someone who would change everything. Do-hwan was 26 years old, and he was tired that he worked at a small restaurant called the Warm Bowl. It was not a fancy place. The tables were old, the chairs were wobbly, and the paint on the walls was peeling. But the food was good, and the prices were cheap, so workers from the nearby factories came here to eat. Do-hwan was a server. He carried bowls of hot noodles and plates of rice from the kitchen to the tables. He smiled at customers, even when his feet hurt. He said thank you when they left small tips. He never complained, even when the work was hard. He worked double shifts almost every day. Morning until night, carrying food, cleaning tables, washing dishes. His back ached. His hands were rough and red, but he needed the money. 3 years ago, his father's fishing vessel had been destroyed in a plasma storm. The insurance company refused to pay. The bank came for their money. Do-hwan's father had already passed away from sickness, and his mother was too old to work. So Do-hwan took all the debt on his own shoulders. Every month, he sent most of his money to his mother. Every month, he paid a little bit of the debt. At this rate, he would be paying for another 15 years. But that was okay. His mother was safe. His family's honor was intact. That was what mattered. Do-hwan lived in a tiny apartment above the restaurant. It was just one room with a small bathroom. The window looked out at the back alley where the garbage was kept. The smell was not pleasant, but the rent was cheap. He did not have many friends. He did not have time for friends. He woke up, he worked, he slept, he woke up again. His life was simple and small, and he had accepted that this was how it would always be. On the night that everything changed, Do-hwan was taking out the garbage. It was late, past midnight. The restaurant had closed an hour ago, but there was always more cleaning to do. He carried 2 heavy bags to the recycling units in the alley. his breath making clouds in the cold air. He was about to go back inside when he heard something. A small sound. Like a baby crying, but not quite. It was higher, stranger, like nothing he had heard before. Do-won stopped. He listened. The sound came again. It was coming from behind the recycling units, where the shadows were deepest. He should have ignored it. He should have gone back inside and gotten some sleep. He had work again in 6 hours. Whatever was making that sound was not his problem. But Do-won had never been good at ignoring things that needed help. He walked slowly toward the sound. He pushed aside some old boxes. And there, curled up in a pile of dirty rags, was the strangest creature he had ever seen. It was a dragon. Do-won had never seen a real dragon before. He had seen pictures, of course. Everyone knew what dragons looked like. They were the rulers of the galaxy, after all. But real dragons never came to places like Taiyang Station. They lived in golden palaces and flew between stars. They did not hide in garbage alleys. This dragon was tiny, no bigger than a house cat. Its scales should have been bright and shiny, but they were dull gray, almost brown. Its body was thin, and Do-won could see the bones underneath the skin. One of its wings was twisted and small, hanging uselessly at its side. Its back legs looked wrong, bent at strange angles. The little dragon looked up at him with big golden eyes full of fear and hope. It made that sound again. That crying sound. It was asking for help. Do-won did not think. He did not calculate the cost or consider the danger. He simply knelt down and reached out his hands. The dragon flinched at first. It had learned to fear hands. But Do-won was patient. He stayed still and made soft, gentle sounds. Slowly, carefully, the dragon moved toward him. When he touched it, he could feel how cold it was. Its body was trembling. It had not eaten properly in days, maybe weeks. Do-won took off his work jacket. It was old and worn, but it was warm. He wrapped the little dragon in it, lifting her gently in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. She looked up at him with those golden eyes and made a small sound. Not crying this time. Something else. Something like wonder. Do-won carried her up the stairs to his apartment. He did not know how to care for a dragon. He did not even know what dragons ate. But he figured food was food and warmth was warmth. He could learn the rest. He made a soft bed from his spare blankets. He put warm water in a bowl and set it next to her. He had some leftover fish from the restaurant, and he cut it into tiny pieces, offering them to her on his palm. The little dragon ate like she had never seen food before. She ate every piece of fish, then licked his palm clean. She drank all the water. Then she looked up at him and waited for more. Do-won gave her everything he had, all his food for the next 3 days. He would figure out tomorrow when it came. When she was finally full, the dragon curled up in the warm blankets and closed her eyes. Before she fell asleep, she made one more sound. A soft, happy sound. Like a purr. Do-won sat beside her and watched her sleep. He should have been worried about money. He should have been worried about his job. Dragons were complicated creatures, and he had no idea how to care for one. But looking at her peaceful face, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Purpose. The next morning, he started researching. He searched the station's network for everything he could find about dragons. Most of it was useless. Articles about dragon politics, dragon wars, dragon economics. Nothing about how to care for a sick, disabled hatchling. But Do-won was stubborn. He kept looking. He found old medical journals. He found obscure scientific papers. He pieced together information bit by bit, like solving a puzzle. Dragons needed certain minerals in their food. He found cheap sources at the station market. Dragons needed heat to digest properly. He bought a second-hand heating pad with his last savings. Dragons needed social contact to stay mentally healthy. He talked to her constantly, even though she could barely understand. He named her Bile. It meant star in his grandmother's old language, because even when she was sick and gray and broken, her eyes shone like stars. Bile did not know that she had once been called Nuri. She did not know that she was the daughter of an emperor. She only knew that this strange human had found her in the dark and brought her into the light. She only knew that she was not alone anymore, and that was enough. Caring for Bile was the hardest thing Dowan had ever done. Dragon food was expensive. The special minerals she needed cost more than his rent. The heating pad used so much electricity that his power bill doubled. When she got sick in the first month, he took her to a medical center, and they laughed at him. They thought he was joking. A human with a dragon? They charged him 3 months of wages just to look at her. Dowan picked up extra shifts. He worked morning, afternoon, and night. He stopped buying new clothes. He stopped eating lunch. Every coin he saved went to BYEOL. His coworkers thought he had lost his mind. There was a young woman named Somi who worked in the kitchen. She was kind, with a round face and quick hands. One day she asked him why he looked so tired all the time. Dowan told her about Bile. Somi stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head and walked away. He heard her telling the others. They all looked at him like he was crazy. A server trying to raise a dragon. It was like an ant trying to raise an elephant. But Dowan did not care what they thought. He had made a promise to Bile, even if she did not understand it. He had picked her up from that alley. She was his responsibility now. The restaurant owner was a stern woman named Yoonji. She was 50 years old, with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that missed nothing. She had owned the Warm Bowl for 20 years, and she ran it with an iron hand. Yoonji watched Dowan work those long shifts. She saw how he rushed home during his breaks. She saw how thin he was getting, how dark the circles under his eyes were growing. One evening, she called him into her office. Dowan expected to be fired. He had been late twice last week because Bile had a fever. He stood before Yoonji's desk with his head down, ready to accept his punishment. But Yoonji did not fire him. Instead, she pushed a paper bag across the desk. Inside were containers of food. Good food. Meat and vegetables and rice. Much more than one person could eat. Dowan looked at her with confusion. Yoonji's face stayed stern, but her voice was softer than usual. She told him that the kitchen had made too much food today. It would go to waste if someone did not take it. He should take it home. Dowan understood. There was no extra food. Yoonji had prepared this for him. For him and BYEOL. He bowed deeply and thanked her. Yoonji just waved her hand and told him to get back to work. After that night, there was always too much food at the end of Dowan's shift. Always just enough for a human and a small dragon. Yoonji never said anything about it. Dowan never asked. But every time he took those bags home, he felt a little less alone. Bile was growing. Not fast, like healthy dragons grew. But slowly, steadily, she was getting stronger. Her scales changed from dull gray to soft silver. Her eyes grew brighter. She learned more words every week. The first time she called him Appa, Dowan cried. Appa meant father. She had heard the word on the video programs he played to keep her company while he worked. She did not fully understand what it meant. But she knew that Dowan was the one who fed her and held her and kept her safe. He was her Appa. That was all that mattered. Dowan built things for her. He was not a builder by training, but he learned. He found old wheels at the junk market and metal rods at the recycling center. He spent his few free hours putting them together. He made her a small cart. It had 4 wheels and a soft cushion inside. Bile could sit in it and push herself around with her front legs. She did not have to drag her broken back legs anymore. The first time she used it, She zoomed around the apartment so fast that she crashed into the wall. Then she laughed. A real happy laugh that sounded like bells. Dawan painted stars on the card. Silver stars on a dark blue background. Because she was his bile, his star. Every night, after work, Dawan sat with her and rubbed her withered wing. The doctors had said it was useless, that it would never work. But Dawan did not believe in never. He massaged the wing gently, trying to help blood flow to the dead muscles. Bile closed her eyes and hummed with pleasure. After 3 months of massage, the wing twitched. It was tiny. Just a small movement. But it was the first time that wing had moved since she was born. Bile felt it, and her eyes went wide. She tried to move it again, but nothing happened. Still, she had felt it. Something was there. Dawan hugged her and told her she was amazing. He told her she could do anything. He told her that wings were not just for flying. Wings were for dreaming too. Byol did not understand all his words. But she understood his love. That was enough. What neither of them knew was that Bile was not just any dragon. Deep inside her, hidden in her blood, there was something special. All royal dragons had it. A beacon. A connection to their family line. It was usually silent, only activating in moments of great emotion. For most of her life, Bile had felt nothing but sadness and fear. The beacon had stayed dark. But now, for the first time, she was feeling something different. She was feeling joy. Real, pure joy. The kind that filled her whole body and made her want to sing. And when she felt that joy, the beacon woke up. It sent out a signal. A tiny pulse of energy that traveled across space. Through star systems, past planets and moons. All the way to the palace at the heart of the Dragon Empire. Emperor Hyok was sitting on his throne when he felt it. He froze. His golden eyes went wide. His ancient heart, which had been cold for so many years, suddenly beat faster. The signal could only come from one dragon. His daughter. His Nuri. She was alive. And more than that, she was happy. For a long moment, the emperor did not move. His advisors looked at him with concern, but he ignored them. His mind was far away, following that signal across the stars. He had told himself to forget her. He had told himself she was better off without him. He had told himself that he would never see her again. But the beacon did not lie. She was out there. She was alive. And something had made her so happy that her royal blood sang with joy. Emperor Hyok needed to know what. He needed to know who. He rose from his throne and gave orders to prepare his ship. He was going to Taiyang Station. He was going to find his daughter. Emperor Hyok arrived at Taiyang Station in secret. He wore his human disguise, a form that all ancient dragons could take. In this shape, he appeared as a tall man with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that burned like molten gold. His face was hard and sharp, like it was carved from stone. He wore simple dark clothes, trying to blend in with the crowds. He did not blend in well. Even in human form, there was something about him that made people step aside. Something dangerous. Something powerful. Workers and merchants moved out of his path without knowing why. Hyok followed the beacon through the Taiyang Station's dirty streets, past the markets where humans sold cheap goods, past the factories where machines roared day and night, past the housing blocks where thousands of people lived in tiny rooms. He had never been to a place like this. In his palace, everything was gold and crystal and fire. Here, everything was gray metal and flickering lights and the smell of oil and sweat. These humans lived such small lives, such hard lives. He wondered why any of them bothered. The beacon led into a narrow street with small shops and restaurants. The buildings were old, their walls stained with age. At the end of the street was a small restaurant with a faded sign that read The Warm Bowl. Above the restaurant, There was a window with a light inside. Hayok looked up at that window, and his breath stopped. Through the dirty glass, he could see them. A young human man sat on the floor with a small dragon in his lap. The dragon was silver-scaled and bright-eyed. She sat in a small cart decorated with painted stars. The human was holding a tablet and pointing at the screen, teaching her something. The dragon made a frustrated sound. Whatever she was learning, it was hard for her. She growled and turned away. The human laughed. It was a kind laugh, without any cruelty. He said something Hayok could not hear, but his face was patient and warm. He lifted the dragon higher on his lap and they tried again. The dragon's wing twitched. Hayok stared. That was Nuri's dead wing, the wing that had never moved. The wing that doctors said would never work. It twitched again. He watched them for a long time. He watched the human feed the dragon small treats when she got answers right. He watched them laugh together at some joke he could not hear. He watched the dragon nuzzle against the human's chest with complete trust. This human had done what the best dragon doctors could not. He had made Nuri's wing move, not through expensive technology or ancient magic, just through patience and love and endless, stubborn care. Hayok did not understand it. In 3,000 years, he had never seen anything like it. The next day, he went into the restaurant. The place was busy with the lunch crowd. Workers sat at simple tables, eating noodles and rice. The smell of cooking meat filled the air. It was a humble place, but it was clean and warm. Hayok took a seat in the corner and ordered food he did not want. He watched the young human worked without rest. He carried heavy trays of food. He smiled at every customer. He cleaned up spills and took complaints without ever losing his patience. He was clearly tired, his movements slow, but he never stopped moving. During a quiet moment, Hayok saw the human check a small device on his wrist. His face changed, softening with worry. He said something to the stern woman who seemed to run the place, then hurried toward a back door. Hayok followed at a distance. The human ran up a narrow staircase to the apartment above. Hayok stood in the shadows of the alley and watched through the window as the human burst through the door. The little dragon was waiting for him, her tail wagging like a dog's. The human picked her up and held her close, checking her over, making sure she was okay. He had only been gone a few hours, but he worried like he had been gone for days. He fed her something from a container. He adjusted her cart. He talked to her in a soft voice, telling her about his day. The dragon listened with bright eyes, understanding some words and not others, but always understanding the love behind them. Then the human looked at the time and his face fell. He had to go back to work. He kissed the top of the dragon's head and promised to return soon. She made a sad sound but did not complain. She understood that her appa had to work. The human hurried back down the stairs. A few minutes later, Hayok saw him back in the restaurant, serving customers with that same tired smile. Hayok stayed until the restaurant closed. He watched the stern woman, Yoonji, pack extra food into bags when she thought no one was looking. He watched her hand those bags to the young human. He saw the gratitude in the human's eyes. These humans, these small, short-lived creatures, they took care of each other. They took care of a dragon that was not even their own kind. When the restaurant was empty and the lights were being turned off, Hayok approached the young human. Do-won looked up, surprised to see a customer still there. He began to apologize, saying the restaurant was closed. Hayok spoke, and his voice was deeper than any human voice should be. He asked about the dragon, the one Do-won kept upstairs. How had he come to have her? Do-won's face changed instantly. His tiredness vanished. His body tensed. His eyes, which had been soft and kind all day, became hard as iron. He asked who wanted to know. Hayok said he was just curious. A dragon with a human was unusual. Dowan's hands curled into fists. He was small compared to Hayok's human form. He was exhausted from 16 hours of work. He had no weapons, no power, no way to defend himself against any real threat. But he stood his ground. He said that Bile was not a curiosity. She was not a thing to be studied or taken. She was his daughter. And if this stranger was here to take her away, he would have to go through Dowan first. Hayok could have killed this human with a thought. He could have burned this entire building to ash with a single breath. He was 3,000 years old. He had destroyed armies. He had conquered worlds. But this small, tired human stood before him with fire in his eyes and no fear in his heart. He was ready to die for a crippled dragon he had found in the garbage. Hayok felt something he had not felt in centuries. Shame. This human had more courage than most dragons he had ever known. This human loved Nuri more than her own father ever had. Hayok lowered his head slightly. It was not quite a bow, but it was close. He asked if he could meet her. Dowan studied him for a long moment. He did not trust this stranger. Everything about the man felt wrong, felt dangerous. But there was something in those golden eyes. Something like pain. Something like hope. Dowan asked why. Hayok was silent for a moment. Then he spoke the truth for the first time in years. He said he had lost someone once. Someone he should have protected. He said he wanted to see that she was happy. Dowan looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded slowly, but he warned that if this stranger made one wrong move, if he scared Bile even a little bit, Dowan would throw him out the window himself. Hayok almost smiled. He followed the human up the stairs, toward the daughter he had abandoned and the judgment he deserved. Bile knew him the moment he walked through the door. Dragons always knew their blood. It was written in their bones, in the fire that burned inside them. Even though she had been a baby when he left her, even though she had tried to forget, she knew. She pressed herself against Dowan's legs and trembled. The tall man stood in the doorway, his golden eyes fixed on her. He did not move. He did not speak. He just looked at her like she was the most important thing in the universe. Dowan knelt down and put his hand on Bile's back. He asked her what was wrong. Bile's voice was small and shaking. She said she knew this man. He was her first father, the one who left her. Dowan looked up at the stranger, and understanding filled his eyes. His face went hard as stone. The man stepped forward, and Dowan moved to block him. But the stranger held up his hands and slowly, carefully, knelt down on the floor. He was at Bile's level now, looking at her face to face. He spoke her name, her real name, Nuri.Byeol. Flinched. The man who was Emperor Hayok told her he was sorry. He said he had made a terrible mistake. He had believed in old rules that said weakness was shameful. He had been afraid of what others would think. He had been a coward. He said he had no right to ask for forgiveness. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. He had left her to suffer alone. Nothing he could say would make that right. Bile's eyes filled with tears. She asked him why. Why did he throw her away? Was she so bad? Was she so ugly and broken that he could not love her? The words hit Hayok like physical blows. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. He said no. He said she was never bad, never ugly, never broken. The broken one was him. He had been too proud, too scared, too blind to see what really mattered. And by the time he understood, it was too late. He looked at Dowan, who stood with his arms crossed and fury in his eyes. Hayok said that this human had done what he could not. This human had taken a dying child from the garbage and given her a life, given her love, given her a home. This human had no money, no power, no reason to help. But he had helped anyway. Hayok's voice cracked as he spoke. He said he had conquered worlds and ruled for 3,000 years. but he had never done anything as brave, as good, as this one human had done. He bowed his head to the floor. The Emperor of 12 star systems bowed to a restaurant server. He said he did not deserve to be Nori's father. Do-hwan had earned that right. But if they would allow it, he wanted to be part of her life. He wanted to try to make things right. He knew he could never fully fix what he had broken, but he wanted to try. Byo looked at Do-hwan. She asked him what she should do. Do-hwan knelt down beside her. His voice was gentle. He said that forgiveness was hard. It could not be rushed. But holding on to anger was also hard. It made the heart heavy. He said Bile did not have to decide anything today. She did not have to forgive if she was not ready. But she could give this man a chance to show if he had truly changed. People could change. Even emperors. Bile was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Hyok with those bright golden eyes. She said she would not call him father. She already had a father. She pointed at Do-hwan, but she said he could visit. He could try to be better. And maybe, someday, they could be family too. Hyok lifted his head. For the first time in centuries, there was hope in his ancient eyes. The weeks that followed changed everything. Hyok did not take Bile away. He did not try to bring her back to the palace. Instead, he stayed on Taiyang Station, learning what it meant to truly care for someone. He used his wealth to build a new medical center on the station. It was the best in the sector, with doctors who could treat any species, any condition. And it was free. Anyone who needed help could get it, no matter how poor they were. He hired the best dragon doctors in the empire to create new treatments for disabilities. Things that had never been studied before because disabled dragons were simply discarded. Within months, they developed a prosthetic wing for Bile, made of lightweight metal and soft fabric, powered by her own fire. The first time she flew, it was only a few feet off the ground. She wobbled and dipped, her new wing struggling to work with her natural one. Do-hwan ran beneath her with his arms stretched out, ready to catch her if she fell. She did not fall. She rose higher, laughing and crying at the same time. She flew in circles around her tiny apartment, knocking over chairs and scattering papers. She did not care. She was flying. After all these years, she was finally flying. Hyok watched from the corner, tears streaming down his stern face. Yoonji stood in the doorway, pretending she had something in her eye. Somi from the kitchen was openly sobbing. Do-hwan just smiled and kept his arms ready. Just in case, the Dragon Empire would never be the same. Hyok returned to his throne, but he was not the same emperor who had left. He declared that the old laws about disabled hatchlings were finished. From now on, every dragon life was precious. Every dragon child would be protected and cared for. The nobles and advisors were shocked. Some were angry. They said he had gone soft, that he was shaming their traditions. Hyok silenced them with a look. He told them about a human, a poor server who worked in a small restaurant on a forgotten station. This human had shown more strength and courage than any dragon warrior. He had proved that true power was not in fire or claws or wings. True power was in the heart that refuses to give up on someone who needs help. If the dragons wanted to be truly strong, they would learn from the humans, not conquer them. Learn from them. By EOL grew up with two fathers. Do-hwan never left Taiyang Station. He kept working at the Warm Bowl, even when Hyok offered him palaces and wealth. He said Bile needed stability. She needed to know that some things would always stay the same. Besides, he liked his job. Yoonji eventually retired and left the restaurant to Do-hwan. He renamed it the Star Bowl after his daughter. It became famous across the sector as the place where an emperor learned what it meant to be humble. Byo Belle grew strong and smart. She learned to fly, to read, to debate, to dream. When she was old enough, She joined the Imperial Council, the first disabled dragon to ever hold such a position. She fought for others like her, for the forgotten and abandoned, for the ones nobody wanted. She never forgot where she came from. Every year, on the anniversary of the night, Do-won found her in the alley. She returned to Taiyang Station. She and her two fathers would share a meal at the Star Bowl, laughing and telling stories while the stars turned overhead. Do-won grew older, as humans do. His hair turned gray. His steps grew slower. But his heart stayed warm, and his arms stayed ready to catch his daughter whenever she needed him. On his last day, Bile was with him. She held his hand with her small claws and told him she loved him. She told him he had saved her life, but more than that, he had taught her what life was for Dot. It was for finding the broken things and making them whole. It was for carrying those who could not walk and lifting those who could not fly. It was for love, stubborn and patient and endless. Do-won smiled at her one last time. He said he was proud of her. He said he would always be her appa, no matter where he went next. Then he closed his eyes and was at peace. The Dragon Empire mourned him as a hero. Statues were built in his honor. His name was taught to dragon children across 12 star systems, but Bile did not need statues to remember him. She remembered the warmth of his jacket on that cold night. She remembered the taste of fish from his palm. She remembered the sound of his voice telling her she could do anything. She remembered that she was his star, and in a galaxy full of fire and darkness. That light never went out. Some empires are built on conquest and fear. The best ones are built on the simple choice to help someone who needs it. That is what the humans taught the dragons. That is why, in the end, the humans won.